Well, to be able to understand and appreciate the technology that was used by our ancestors to create something that is as complicated as carving a canoe that's going to be an ocean voyaging canoe, you need to have the right understanding of wood, how it reacts when it's wet, how it reacts when it's dry, and also that when we do all of that with the modern tools, with the chainsaws and the axes, the metal axes and gouges and planes, that our ancestors could do the exact same thing by those older tools. And if you cannot appreciate how they created those tools, then you will not appreciate how sophisticated they were in becoming marine architects and being able to create the tools to become marine architects. So that's really the important part of recreating those tools.
Not much different, I don't think. You can try any way to come up with the fastest way to build a canoe or something, but still use the old traditional tools or handheld tools, even to repair it, like one of our canoes that just got repaired, the Savage Warrior, got renewed, you know. And even with the longhouse, just part of our teachings where this is how our ancestors built it. We're going to continue building them this way, you know, and it's showing that respect and also that pride again of who we are, that showing that love and respect probably for like our Uncle Dickie, you know. He was one of the ones that repaired the Savage Warrior, and him showing his love and respect for our uncle that built that canoe, Uncle Dominic Point. I'm gonna do it the way he made it, you know, use the tools that he used and the tools that were brought down to him. I don't think they're not much different from when our ancestors and, you know, were young men building homes, longhouses and canoes, and only thing different is steel, you know, blades now. Back then it was just rocks, you know, shaped out. That's the only difference, I think. Yeah, try and keep it as traditional as we can.
Canoes, well, I know they used to build different types of canoes for different things. They had canoes for fishing, canoes for hunting ducks and everything. My grandpa was telling me they used to have a special canoe for hunting ducks. They built it. It was really wide, pretty wide, because he used to have to go out into the salt chuck, look for the black ducks and the divers. And it was built wide, and it was they used to pack the bow with mud. And they'd bring a bunch of little kindlings, and they'd bring some green wood. And they'd go out there and they'd paddle along. And they had a net made of sea lion guts, he called it. And they said that they used to watch the divers and dive like that, and get dark, and they'd light that fire and with the kindlings, and then they'd put the green wood on there, and it would be just smoldering, eh? But soon as the wind would come and hit that, the ambers would light up. Ducks would start diving towards the canoe. As soon as they got close, they threw that net. When they come up, their heads would come through the mesh. And used to grab them and hit them with a club, put them in the canoe.
That was one thing I was thinking of, is can't beat around the bush with, especially with the canoes. That's one thing that's the first thing that came to my mind, My brother said you could try to figure out a faster way to get to it, but, talking about əsnaʔəm and talking about ancestors, they were watching us, and, if you're trying to find a faster way, they might make you mess up or something on that canoe, start over, It's one thing we're always taught,
Patience.
Patience, and learn the right way and keep at it the way you're going. And
we still use, if you're going to build a 11-man war canoe, right, and of course I'm speaking hanging over the shoulders of some good men who did this, they did it by hand. So, other than not using a beaver tooth for your blade for your adze, you're still using an adze, right? You're still honing it out that way and then sanding it down. The technology really hasn't changed. And that art has really been passed down verbally. There's been no real book. There's books about them, but the art of that is really there. And there's so much more to it than I've even learned. And we have lost quite a bit, but it's still there. We can get it back. Because woodworking principles are always still around. But it's really something. I remember talking to late Dominic, Grandpa Dominic, he was always, and he was saying how each log's different. It's got its own life. So you got to work with what it gives you, not what you take from it. So it's a very fluid thing too, and I think that's part of the reason why you use hand tools. You plane too fast, it's gone. The only thing I have seen change in my lifetime is the use of more commercialized paddles for racing.
And I remember the second time I lived here, I'm a teenager, and I lived at Grandpa James' house. Grandpa Leonard's next door, and going next door and watching. And my grandfather would be smoking a cigarette, and he'd be looking at the canoe. And, I'm a kid. What you doing, Grandpa? He's sitting there and he's looking at it, and he's smoking a cigarette, and he's going, looking for shadows. And I'm looking at it and I'm going, oh, kind of shadows. He goes on the canoe. So he goes, come here, and we go back where he's sitting's maybe 12, 15 feet away from the bow of the canoe. So he's looking down the bow, looking for shadows. Sit down, sit down. Just look, I'm looking. Kind of shadows. Shadows, he says, look. Looking at it, I'm going, I don't see any shadows, Grandpa. Just tells me to move, sits there. He looks and he goes, come here. Brings me down, puts my hand on the canoe, and I rub it. And I can feel a lump. I feel the lump, remember where it is, come sit down. Come back, sit down, look down the canoe, and then I can see the shadow. So I'm looking for shadows. So when I see the shadow, I go down, feel, mark the shadow, take the sandpaper, take the lump out. That's amazing. 4 years. Beautiful canoe. Put it in the water. What I understand wasn't beat. endeavor. The way he built it was that the design work was just beautiful. So he knew what he was doing.
Just got to make sure there's no twist in it, because when you got a twist in it, when your canoe, it might look good, but your canoe's going to start to bend after. And then when you dig your canoe out, if it's the weather, if you don't have a shed over it, you got to turn your canoe all the time. Because if you don't, like when Uncle Dominic built Savage Warrior, the one you see out here, he used to always go one way. We had a hard time with it, and then I asked him, how come it's doing that anyways? And he says, you know what happened? He says, your Auntie Rose got sick, and I didn't work on that canoe for about 17 days, he said. And it was really hot. So I didn't make it out there because I was busy taking care of your Auntie Rose, he said. He said, so I didn't make it out there to turn the canoe. So the sun was beating on that one side for 17 days. He said, so that other side's different than the other side. So we had to put sticks in there and hold it out so it wouldn't go the one way. We took all the seats out and pried it out and put braces in there. All along through the first 4 or 5 seats under the rungs we had braces across. So if you don't have a shed which you're building your canoe in, the weather has a real big bearing on it. Because if it dries out on one side, that side will never ever be the same as the other side. So it's one main thing he told me about building a canoe.
And also for them to be marine architects, where they actually design the canoes, carve the canoes out of a solid log, and be able to go out into the ocean with, or up into the rivers, fighting the currents in the rivers. They've designed each canoe has a specific design for specific use. Very much like in today's world, they would build what they call a duck punt. And we would be using a river canoe and having the foliage as camouflage to go duck hunting. And that's something that many of our, I think, our visitors and our own people are not aware of.
And then you look at the canoes and the things that we used on the waterways. Canoes are the foundation for a number of different boats. I think we were the only ones that had the type of canoes we did in the world. To acknowledge those types of societal building blocks is really important. And again, I'm going to go back for our own young people to see the kinds of things we develop, the beauty of some of these, what they call artifacts that are on display. So intricate. It took so much skill to be able to carve some of them, the tools that they were using, the way that they developed for beautifying their bodies with these different types of jewelry and things like that. I think they were at the same level, if probably not superior, at the time of contact to the Europeans, and we really have to do a lot more to help people understand that.
So it's part of who we are. Race, canoes. Big part of our lives is canoes. So everybody who's connected to əsnaʔəm and Musqueam are connected physically by canoes. Got to go upriver, got to come downriver, got to go to the island, got to come back, got to go to the outside, got to come back, got to go up north, got to come back. All canoes. So canoes, for me, very important part of our lives, and then they're not only using them to harvest salmon, to harvest seals, to go from here to the other side to get clams at what's called Spanish banks. Got to go there, got to go over there to get medicine, got to go over there up just a little bit more. Ducks, the best ducks are over there, so we've got to go over there. Paddle.